You sounded great.
Yeah, right.
What? You telling me you weren't feeling it? You were in it. We don't need to put them all out.
I know, but we just need to film.
Your hearing is deteriorating rapidly.
We'll come back. Till then, Lou, we just keep going, okay?
No.
Lou,
No.
let's play tomorrow. Let's see what it's like, okay? I'm gonna be like a click track. You can play to me.
You have to understand, your first responsibility is to preserve the hearing you have.
I can't hear you. Do you understand me? I can't. I'm deaf. I'm deaf.
So first off, how did you and Darius Marder came up with the idea of Son of Metal?
Well, I grew up playing the drums. I'm a drummer. When I was 10 years old, I started playing the drums, basically because I fell in love with. I was a big Miami Vice fan on TV. And when I heard that Phil Collins drum solo, for In the Air Tonight, that fill that he does on that electric drum set, it was like the coolest thing I'd ever heard. And so as a 10-year-old boy, I thought I wanted to do that. Then when I became a teenager, I started listening to heavy metal music a lot. And, my heroes when I was a teenager were Lars Ulrich from Metallica, drummer Metallica, and Dave Lombardo, the drummer for Slayer. And I spent my whole adolescence trying to be like those guys and trying to learn, their riffs. I would sit there and listen to Angel of Death, by Slayer, and just put it in my headphones and just play along with it, try to keep up with it, or the whole and Justice for All album. It was like just so hard to play, but that was like the bar I set for myself as a drummer. But in playing heavy metal music, loud music, I used to occasionally wear earplugs as a drummer, but I never could feel it. I never could feel the music as much. So I would take them out. And I used to play so many hours upon hours, and I had bands that I used to play in, all throughout high school. And by the time I turned 20, I started having a lot of hearing loss. And as a filmmaker, it always really concerned me, because I needed my, I really needed my ears for life, I thought, and for the movies I was making. And but it never went away, and it just got worse over the years. And I kept playing the drums, and I never put ear plugs in, and I just had more and more hearing loss over the years. So that's one thread that was going on in my life. The other thing that happened is I saw this movie called In the Land of the Deaf by Nicholas Philibert. Great French documentarian, and he made this film called In the Land of the Deaf. And when I saw that movie, I saw it back in 2007. I think he made it in 96 or something. When I saw that movie, I walked out of it, and all of a sudden I had I had this revelation of this story that I wanted to, the story came to me, and I called it Metalhead at the time. And I wrote down this story. I wrote like a 10-page treatment for this story that was all about a heavy metal drummer that blows out his eardrums, has to learn to live in the land of the deaf while he tries to get a cochlear implant. And, eventually he gets the money for the cochlear implant. And then once he gets it, he realizes that he found himself, in that community. And and this was 2007 when I came up with that idea, and I wrote it down, and as a treatment, but I didn't want to write a script. I was in a phase of my life where I didn't want to, I was interested in, I'd been making a lot of docs at that time, and I was interested in like this collision between documentary and fiction. And so I decided what I would do is find one of my heavy metal drummer heroes and ask them if they wanted to be in this hybrid movie where they would play a version of themselves going through this narrative that I would kind of impose on top of their lives. And so there was a number of different bands I looked at. I was looking at High on Fire, but then I eventually settled on this band Jucifer. And Jucifer was a husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend team. They lived in an RV. They traveled from town to town, earning just enough money in the clubs that they would play to get gas money to fuel up their RV to be able to take them to the next town. And I thought that I let that part of their characterization, or that part of their lives, kind of inform and write the script. And so I was really working with them on this hybrid doc. I mean, the whole thing about them there's a totally different version of metal that would have been out there if, say, I would have chose High on Fire, and all of a sudden it would have been a story about a guy, 3 dudes in a band. But something drew me to that story of relationships, which I'm always drawn to in the stories I tell. And it became Edgar and Amber in Jucifer. And I spent, over the course of 2 years, I would go and visit them every 3 months. And I, invested my money in it and got a couple other, producers involved to help finance it. And I was shooting the first act on film. If you think about like the structure of metal, it's very similar to the structure of Place Beyond the Pines, because I actually came up with those 2 ideas in the same month. This very delineated 3-act structure. And so I was shooting the first act of metal on super 16 millimeter film. And it was this hybrid doc, with Edgar and Amber. And Edgar in real life isn't suffering any hearing loss. But we made this, this narrative of him going through this thing, and took him to a hearing doctor, and did all those, all the scenes that you see in the film, and just played with them. And then I was halfway into the second act, into the deaf world, when I finally had the opportunity to make Blue Valentine. And there was a few reasons why at that point, I couldn't go forward anymore with the movie with Edgar and Amber. I think the biggest, Metalhead, the movie I was making, taught me so many lessons about this collision between narrative and real life, that I've taken into all of my films. It's the way I kind of it's kind of like situational filmmaking. You set up these situations and you bring actors into situations and you kind of let them swim in it. And I learned a lot of those techniques from making Metal. But I also found myself at a bit of an impasse in making that film, because here was Edgar and Amber playing themselves, but sometimes my narrative, I had desires for them to do certain things in the narrative or make certain choices as their characters that they wouldn't necessarily make in their real lives, and they were uncomfortable with it. So I knew I couldn't continue going with that version. I mean, this always it happens with actors sometimes. Like, you can get into a conversation with an actor where they'll say, "Oh, my character would never do that," and then you get into a discussion with them about why it could be a possibility, and they try it. But when you're working with real people And if they say, well, I would never do that, then you're at a, you understand, it's like there's nowhere to go from there, without being coercive and then having people regret things. And so it couldn't keep going. And so I left the film at that point. This was like 2009, and chose instead to go make Blue Valentine and then to make Place Beyond the Pines. And Darius and I had really, had been friends for all this time. Actually, the very first conversation I ever had with Darius, the very first time I ever met him face to face, was at a children's birthday party in Prospect Park. And, living in New York, usually when you meet someone, the questions are, hi, what's your name? And then the second question is, what do you do? Which I can't stand. Career, people defining themselves by career. But that happened with us. So Darius said, what do you do? I said, I'm a filmmaker. He said, what films do you make? I said, well, I'm actually making a film right now called Metalhead, about a heavy metal drummer, blows out his eardrums, has to live in the land of death, gets, whatever. Just told him the story. And he was super intrigued by it. And our conversation at this children's birthday party just went on and on and on. And then we started seeing each other when we would drop our kids off at school, because our kids were going to the same school. And we used to say, oh, let's get a cup of coffee. And we would talk about movies and life and everything. And Darius had his films that he was trying to get made. And, eventually when I made Place Beyond the Pines, I was, I'd had the script written, and Ben Cochio and I had written the script, and I was about 10 weeks out of production, and Darius had some really strong notes on the script, and I was so intrigued by him, and was so inspired by what he was bringing, that I asked him to help me write it. So him and I wrote, did some rewrites on the script there, like leading up to shooting it, and just had this connection, this bond, as filmmakers, that was really amazing, like this, like a brotherhood of creativity, which was amazing. And, I was so like thankful, and by all of, the contributions he made on that film, and his kind of selfless uh, and challenging ability to give of himself and of his ideas to that film, that when the film was all over, I used to just tell Darius, when are you going to make a movie? And, because I just knew how talented the guy was and how smart he was. And I just felt like the world needed to see what he could make, and so when Pines was wrapping up, I had we talked, and we always would talk about metal. And we had one talk where we were walking around the streets of Fort Greene in Brooklyn. And I said, why don't you take it? Why don't you do it? And I was like, I don't want anything from it. I just want you to take, to address the situation with my other producers, the people that had been involved in this before, just, connect with them, and connect with Edgar and Amber, and make sure it's all good with them. And but as far as you and me, this, you should take this baby and raise it. And he took it and ran with it. And it was, that was, I think the handoff happened probably in 2012, and he took it and made it such his own movie. And it's, it's so amazing to watch what he did with it, because, there are so many elements of that original idea, that original seed, I guess the DNA of what that story always was, that came from, from my experience as being a drummer, and kind of this fantasy that I had of this. And also from all that, from, for many years while I was, shooting metal, when he was interested in it, I gave him all the footage to take a look at. So he had all these years to kind of study that footage and internalize it. And anyway, it was it was an amazing like co-parenting thing that that he took over. One thing I also say is, like, there was I remember this one moment with me and Darius. We went to a film one time. Darius is a super opinionated guy, very opinionated, and we were in this screening of this film, and there was a Q&A after. We both really did not like this film that we saw. We were both kind of offended to our core with this film that we saw. And I remember in the Q&A, Darius wanted to talk, like, address the filmmaker, and I remember saying, just make your own film. You don't have to respond this way. You respond through making a film. I remember he was so frustrated because he wanted to say something to the person. I was like, it's not, everyone can make whatever film they want. I don't want to, my job isn't that to be of a critic or to take people to task or to try to change what films they make. I think my job, and I think the job of an artist, is just to make the world you want to see. Don't try to change the way other people see the world necessarily. Just show your world. And so, I'm so happy that he was able to make this film and kind of put into the world his vision of the world as he saw it. It was a better way to answer or to ask the question than to confront the person, I thought.
Who came up with the brilliant title Sound of Metal? Were there other titles you guys had in mind at first?
Well, that's Darius. Darius came up with that title. My title was Metalhead. And I came up with the title Metalhead before I ever came up with the idea for the movie. I used to go to concerts in New York City. My whole life I went to heavy metal concerts, but I just remember being in the crowd in a mosh pit at a High on Fire concert, and like being pushed into the back of someone's head, and my face smashed into this mass of hair. And I thought to myself, metalhead is just but then they made the Black Mirror episode called Metalhead, and then they made some other Norwegian film called Metalhead. And I think the idea of the title Metalhead was giving too much of a connotation of one world. And so Darius came up with Sound of Metal.
Could you talk about the development of the script and those that were involved in it?
I consider, when I gave Darius the movie, the idea to take and do it as his own, it's like an adoption, and if you adopt a child, you give a child up for adoption, it does no good to the child or the new parents or to you to like look over the shoulder or to help raise. Like if you give a gift, if you entrust someone with life, you do it, you entrust them. And so, and I trusted Darius with my life, at that point. And I knew just from working with him, and knew from my friendship with him, that he would raise this thing right. And when he told, so I kept, over all those years, I always would talk to him about things, but I wasn't necessarily, I never was like a script consultant for him. I did my time on the film and then gave it to him. And when I heard he brought his brother in, I thought it was just a brilliant move for him to bring his brother in, um, to co-write it with him, because his brother's a musician. His brother had some had a year or so where he had kind of a changing this life-changing event, and he and I thought it was just the right choice. And brothers know each other, and I thought his brother could really do an amazing job to pull some truths out of Darius. There's clearly an immediate trust there. I mean, I think filmmaking is all about trust. You have to trust the people you're working with. And I think that idea of working with family feels clear on that.
So what is your writing habit in general?
Well, let's see here. This is some of the new movies up there. My writing habit is just to write. To me, it's an exercise. It's if you're a runner and you don't run and you go out and try to run a mile, you're going to be winded. But if you do it every day, you're going to build stamina. And, so it's very athletic to me. Writing is about doing it. I'm not the best writer. Technically, I'm not a great writer. But to me, especially being a film writer, to me, my idea about being a writer is just to get out the ideas and to have a connection to my own subconscious. So I write my dreams down. Anytime I have a dream, I discipline myself to write my dreams down as a way to always keep myself connected to my unconscious, so that my unconscious is, so I'm able to access parts of myself. And I find that doing that allows me to sit down at any time and write. And so, I write every day.
And do you usually write in the morning time or nighttime, and how many hours? Like 4 hours or?
Whenever it comes. but I find I was always a nighttime person, but I find actually the best time now. I have kids who are older now, but I find and so I find getting up early is the best time for me to write now. 6 a.m. I bought this thing, this happy light, which is like it's a light that emits like 10,000 watts of pure daylight. And so I put my happy light next to my computer, and I'd sit down early in the morning when it's dark, and I start writing. And it's exhilarating. And then by the time, say my kids wake up, say it's a weekend, they wake up at 10 a.m., I've already gotten, a 4-hour stretch of writing in. But then the writing can happen at any time. The writing can happen through dictating on a phone. I dictate so many ideas on a phone and then come back later and then type them out. And I think the thing with me with writing is I don't censor my writing. I don't judge it. I try to think very like a diary. I try to just put the pen or to the paper, to put the fingers to the keyboard, and just let it go.
So from my interview I had with Paul Racy, he stated that one of his favorite scenes from the film was when he was at the round table with Ray's character Ruben. The scene when Ruben was asking him for money. Did that scene appear in the first draft of the film, or did that come much later?
That is a great scene. Great scene. No, that was not in. I mean, I don't know about the first draft, but that wasn't in the story that I wrote. That was a construction. Darius came up with the whole, and his brother came up with the addict community. and the addict storyline. That wasn't in my original conception of it, but I thought it was brilliant. Yeah, brilliant way to go. And Paul Raci, man, that's like, it's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen.
Yeah, he informed me that was his last day of shooting the film. That scene was the last day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could feel it, you could feel the sense of saying goodbye in that scene.
Use one word to describe each of these individuals that were involved in Sound of Metal. The first person is Darius Marder.
Friend.
Abraham Marder.
Brother.
Riz Ahmed.
Energy.
Olivia Cook.
Amber.
Paul Raci.
MVP.
Lauren Ridloff.
Can I say wanted to see more?
Okay. And Matthew Marek.
Just legend.
Last but not least, you, Derek Cianfrance.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know?
Drummer.
So congratulations on your Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Where were you when you discovered that you and your mates got nominated?
I was in the bathroom in a hotel in Richmond, Virginia, on the way back from a family road trip in my minivan.
And if you win, who would you like to thank first?
Well, that's presumptuous, but I can't say, but I just know that I would just say that as a drummer, you need special parents in order to be a drummer, because a drummer is very disruptive. And as a kid, as a drummer, I used to, I just had a lot of love and support from my parents, and they didn't mind that I made noise. And I have kids now, and I know that's a big thing. I never was told ever not to play the drums. And I remember used to play my drums and look out the window, and there would be my neighbors sitting on their lawn listening to me. So I had a lot of support and love as a child. And I don't know if that's always the case with drummers, because drumming is disruption. So yeah.
Sean Bobbitt, he's your cinematographer for The Place Beyond the Pines, and he's also nominated this year's BAFTA and the Oscars. Have you spoken to him since the nominations?
I haven't spoken to Sean in a couple of years, but I owe him a call. Thanks for reminding me. And I'm so happy for him. I mean, I thought the look of that film, all of his stuff is, he's he's a cinema warrior, that guy.
You wrote and direct 2 book-based projects. The first one being The Light Between Oceans, and I Know This Much Is True. So which novel or novella, short story, or even article would you like to adapt next?
I'm not really thinking that way right now. I mean, I have a historical series I'm working on that I've been working on for a long time, and my other projects right now are all originals, I think, aren't they? No, there's another one I'm making also. I'm working on an adaptation of this book, Muscle, which I've been working on for A lot of my movies take forever. I mean, look at Metal is like 14 years since inception. Blue Valentine was 12 years since inception. Muscle will take the lead here, because Muscle has already been, it's been 14 years now, and I still haven't shot it. So that's on the docket.
And I'll just want to make a suggestion. If you want to check out any book, there's a book called Bod Not Body by Christopher Curtis. So it's in the 1930s, and it's like the Depression era. So if you want to check that out,
Okay, what's it called?
Bod Not Body. BUD.
Oh, cool.
Bod Not Body. Yeah.
Nice.
Just Google it sometime.
Nice.
So my next question is, out of the 6 episodes of This Much Is True, which one was the most memorable one for you, and why?
Well, I didn't really when I was making that, I just was making it as like a movie, basically a 6.5-hour movie. And so making them as different episodes, they only really became different episodes in the script phase, because I cut them up like that in the script phase. But when I was shooting it, we were block shooting it as just one massive, movie. And so it's hard for me to separate them as individual, although each episode does have its own, is allowed to do its own things. But I think the final episode for me is the culmination in that show. That's where the catharsis is reached. And I know it's a very it can be a very grueling experience, because that character suffers so much in that show. And I think what the last episode represents to me was the culmination of a lot of years of similar story that I've been trying to tell about family, about the bond and the burden of family, and about legacy, and kind of being haunted by your past. And then that last episode, there's a release from that, and in a lot of ways marks kind of the end of that chapter for me as a filmmaker. I feel like I got to a place that I don't need to repeat it again. So it kind of, that last episode to me was cathartic to me, and felt like the end of a movement.
I believe you liked to watch horror films when you're
Yes.
young, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Okay. So have you ever considered like adapting a horror novel into a film or a TV series?
I have a horror movie that I'm working on right now. It's with a couple of really good writers are working on it right now. I don't want to say too much about it. It's not an adaptation, it's an original. But yes, episode 4 of I Know This Much Is True, I was able to kind of delve into some of my love of horror movies. Episode 4 kind of was teetering on that precipice of horror. And yeah, I mean, when I was loving heavy metal music as a teenager, I mean, I still do, but yeah, when I was 13, 14 years old, I mean, horror movies were horror movies were big for me as in my early childhood too. The first movie I ever watched on VHS was Creepshow, George Romero. And that caused me to go watch all the other George Romero movies: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Monkey Shines. I used to just study his films all the time. And then that leads to Sam Raimi and John Carpenter and all the, so many masters.
You obviously said Phil Solomon was your mentor in helping you becoming the filmmaker that you are today. For those who have never watched his film, which one would you recommend that they should check out first?
Remains to be Seen or The Exquisite Hour would be the first two that come to mind for Phil. I ended up going to, my whole life wanted to make narrative films. I was obsessed with movies. I had a dream when I was a kid to go to, USC film school or NYU film school. I used to sleep under a picture of Martin Scorsese. I put him on my ceiling above my bed, it was just like worshipped this idea of the film school generation, when I was growing up. And so heavy metal drummers and Scorsese, that was my altar basically as a teenager. But when I ended up going to the University of Colorado Film School, I went there because financially we couldn't afford to go to the larger film schools. So I went to a local school, and I was disappointed at first, but it became such a blessing. I'm so thankful. If I had to go back in time and say I did have like the finances to go to a giant film school like NYU or USC, which I'm sure would be great, I would have still chose to go to University of Colorado, because I got to meet these amazing professors like Phil Solomon and Stan Brakhage, who really showed me a whole different world of filmmaking and of cinema and the possibilities of cinema, and Phil, I was able to really watch these people who were artists living as artists. And fortunately, Phil kind of took me under his wing, and, he passed away a couple years ago now. But he's remained for me like, he's like my Jiminy Cricket. He's my conscience. And he talks to me all the time. Anytime I make a film, anytime I'm on set, anytime I'm writing, anytime I'm in the edit, I hear his voice, and he still guides me. That's and his films are amazing. American Falls was, the last major film that he made, and that's kind of a masterpiece.
And what's the best advice have you ever received about making it in the industry? Well,
Phil, I'll take Phil's advice to me, which was, as an artist, you have to risk failure.
And this is my last question. I asked Paul Raci in one word, how would he describe his experience acting in Sound of Metal? And he said, blessing. So I'm going to ask you the same question in one word. How would you describe your experience, just your overall experience from writing it and just till now being
blessed.
nominated?
Blessed.
Blessing? Yeah. Oh, besides blessing, though.
I mean, no, that's a good word, though. I mean, I feel that way in general, in life in general, in everything. Being able to be a filmmaker, this is the dream I had from when I can't remember. And I feel blessed to be able to be living that dream, and blessed that I've had the opportunities in life to be able to find, to follow through and fulfill those, and blessed that I was able to, help out a friend get his dream going too.
Found a place.
I think it's important that you stay here with us right now, Ruben. We're looking for a solution to this. Not this.
I need you to wait for me, okay? You're it for me, Lou. You're my heart. You're it for me, okay? You gotta wait for me. Life.
Ruben, the world does keep moving. It can be a damn cruel place. But those moments of stillness, becomes radiant and magnificent. All the fear is gone. That place will never abandon.